And if they have a very serious relationship with their thinking, that's where I want to start. And I want to help them have a more casual relationship with their thinking. This is a core part of the work that I do, is helping people to have a more casual relationship with the thoughts that are in their head.
Hi, I'm Jay, a certified life coach and former educator who believes that rediscovering ourselves takes just a little bit of courage. This show is focused on helping you develop the mindset and the courage to regain your confidence, to redefine yourself, and to reimagine your life, one episode at a time. Jason Goldberg, aka JG. I guess we're going to figure out what we call each other since our both names are Jason, but welcome to Positivity on Fire.
You know, we got the coolest name to ever be given to anybody in the world. So I think we should just celebrate that we are amazing. And so supposedly, and you know, it's funny, I've heard this for so many years, I've never looked it up. Supposedly Jason means healer in some kind of language. Have you seen this?
Absolutely. And that's where my mind was going to go. It's like, we're both coaches and Jason means healer. So there's got to be something in that.
So it wasn't just my Jewish mother trying to pump me up. That's like an actual thing.
Well, it probably was a both and.
It was a both and. Yeah, that actually makes more sense. Yeah,
absolutely. She was a both and to get you pumped up and to say, "Hey, you've got a life filled of going to, heal people."
I love that. I think it's so awesome. Good. Well, I'm glad I got it validated. I don't think I've never been interviewed by another Jason where I could ask that question, but I've already gotten all the value I need out of this conversation. So
I'm well, it's great, and hopefully the listeners have as well. And we'll just we'll end it here and get on with our days. So
thanks, everyone.
That's right. Well, and it's interesting too, right? Like your book, you have a book, and we'll talk a little bit about it because I have some questions about it. Prison Break, Vanquish the Victim. Own your obstacles, and then lead your life. And so, here's my biggest takeaway from that whole book. These have been sitting on my desk for an entire week, and the people can't see it at home. But Jason, apparently, not only did we share the same name, but we have a love for like funky socks.
Oh, that's awesome! I didn't realize you had the same proclivity, the same obsession.
Exactly. And so last week we were supposed to meet, and you lost power. We couldn't make it happen. These socks have been sitting on my desk for like an entire week, and I don't. People are probably wondering why they're sitting here, but
I think that's awesome. I love that you did it. Yeah, literally, the power went out 1 minute before we were meant to start. Like literally, I was logging in. It was 1 minute before the top of the hour, and the entire building went out for 8 hours. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, right? We talked about our names being the same, the love for the socks, and then your story. Like in the book itself, the story. Like I felt like I was reading a parallel story to my own life. Like you and I were both in IT, so that there's another similarity. You and I both have struggled with weight, both struggled with like pivoting. I felt like I was reading my own story. So thank you for sharing it with me. It was a great read.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I'm so happy you saw yourself in it. And that's the beauty of storytelling is that, when we share our stories, it actually has nothing to do with us. It's a chance for other people to have their experience validated, sometimes for the very first time. And especially in the world of the mental health conversation or personal growth or whatever it is you want to call it, there are so many people, even though that conversation has been brought so much to the forefront, there are still so many people that think they are alone in their experience of what they've experienced in the past, of what they're experiencing now. And so I think it's a responsibility all of us have to tell our stories. You don't have to be a professional speaker or coach to do so. Everybody should be sharing their stories, if nothing else, just so people know they're not alone in their experience.
No, I agree with that 100%. And because we're two men talking about it, like men even more so, right? We don't have a proclivity for sharing our stories or being transparent on how we got from point A to point B. And so I think it's even more important that there's two guys talking about mental health and like what are we supposed to do and how do we move forward and how do we find our passion. So I appreciate you raising that.
Yeah.
One of the things in your book, and we won't talk about the book the entire time, but what I found interesting was you said the being comes before the doing.
Right.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the thing is I remember there was a time when United and American Airlines both were taking a look at what Southwest was doing. And Southwest is, the no frills airline. They don't have any classes. There's no first class. There's no lounge to go into any of that stuff. They're the cheapest, one of the cheapest. And they were one of the only airlines, if not the only airline, that was profitable for like 20 or 25 years straight, where a lot of the other airlines were faltering and having a lot of issues. And so American and United looked at that and said, we give our people less stuff and we charge less money. Like we can do that. And so they did it. They created like TED was like the United Airlines version, and then American had some version of their own little thing, and it failed miserably. Because the strategy of simply lowering your price and giving less to your customers was not what made Southwest successful. It's that Southwest had this energy, this perspective, this lens of we are going to do everything we can to show the people that are our passengers that we care about them, that we love them. I mean, their stock symbol is literally love, right? They started in Dallas Love Field Airport, whatever it was. And so love is the core of who they are. It's who they're being when they carry out these strategies. So if we only focus on the doing, if we only focus on the strategy or the thing we're doing in the outer world of form, but we're not focusing on who we are being when we are doing it, then at best, we can maybe be successful with somebody else's ideas and perspective. And at worst, it doesn't work for us like it didn't work for United and American.
You used a word in there that resonated with me. You said love.
Yep.
Right? And one of the things that I love about getting to have conversations with people like you is learning what their life motto is. So what is Jason Goldberg's life motto?
Yeah, mine's really simple, man. I have a one-line life plan / one-line business plan. Luckily for me, it overlapped, and I think for a lot of people, it actually can overlap if they want to give themselves permission to see this. But my one-line life / business plan is to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% more joy than I found them. And I don't care how I'm doing that. I don't have to be a coach to do that. Again, it could be with a stranger. It could be with a Starbucks barista. It could be with a TSA agent at the airport. Like wherever I'm in the world, the goal here is, can I do something to contribute at least 5% more joy to this person's life? And when I do that, life just seems to work pretty well. And so I try to do that as much as possible.
And that kicks right back to where kicking off the show was talking about healing. Like, how do you see yourself as the 5% more joy as someone who's healing others? Where did that come from for you?
I think it mainly came from suffering for me, which is where I think it comes from for most people. It was my desire to, so it's interesting, the whole, the front facing message of leaving everybody I meet with 5%, at least 5% more joy than I found them. There's a flip side to that. And that is that I want to leave everybody I meet with at least 5% less suffering than I found them. Because I had such a level of just chronic suffering growing up because of my own experience, because of not knowing how to navigate my thinking, because of, getting caught up in the circumstances of life that I thought were creating these feelings and emotions for me. And so as somebody who didn't feel growing up, that he was, lovable or that he was really seen or heard or accepted by most people in his life, I decided that I was going to do everything I could to not have the people around me feel that way. That if there was any way that I could contribute to them feeling the opposite of that, then it was my duty, my responsibility, my dharma, my mission, whatever you want to call it, was to do that for as many people as possible. So it came from me not having the thing that I'm trying to give to as many people as possible.
So what brings you joy like on an ordinary day? Who does that for you? Who gives you the extra 5%?
Yeah, man, so many things. I mean, comedy is such a huge part of my life that I'm such a big fan of anything that is comedic. So that could be like TV shows, stand-up comedy, movies, anything like that, podcasts, like funny podcasts, things like that. Anything that's funny, even funny, just social media videos. I get a lot out of those. And then being around the people that I love, like being around like my really close group of friends, the ones that you could sit on the couch and everybody could be on their phone and not talk to each other, and yet you still feel super connected to them. That's the kind of people, the ones that you don't have to be on for, the ones that you can just show up as you are on your good days, on your not so good days, and they love and accept you. And being able to do that kind of stuff with my friends and going off and venturing and doing things together, which is always really fun. And also seeing the impact of the things that I'm putting out in the world on people. And when it does seem to land for them, that brings me a ton of joy. It just validates why I'm doing what I'm doing and inspires me and encourages me to keep doing it.
In your book, you had mentioned the phrase, the universal boarding pass. I really love that. I love that. So can you let my audience know a little bit more about what you meant by the universal boarding pass?
I'd love to tell you, brother. I have no idea. I honestly
you
don't
recall. It was a phrase.
I wrote, yeah. I've literally created tens of thousands of hours of content, both written and in video and audio form. And it sounds awesome. I'd love to know what I meant by that. But I couldn't tell you.
That's great. It resonated with me. So I'm going to riff off of the universal boarding pass
Please.
A little bit. What I took away from the universal boarding pass was that being open, I think, to experiencing different things. right? Being open to go
Sure.
anywhere and do anything and kind of like the world at your feet. And I think that all like people are afraid to do that because of fear, right? And so I see fear as just a belief in yourself where the contraction can't comes into play. And so for me, like the universal boarding pass is like, if you remove the contractions from your life, that's when things open up, right? So if you put it in the context of like COVID and travel, everything was shut down for a long time. People said you can't. But as soon as they said you can, people were ready to go. So why wouldn't we do that in our own lives? So what's one thing that you've always wanted to do in your life that you haven't done yet?
Oh, it's a good question. Maybe, I mean, there's nothing like really sticking out to me. I love to travel and I've been to a ton of places. There are still some countries I haven't been to that I'm looking forward to going to. So I'm really, really looking forward to going to Turkey, which I'm planning on going this summer. But Turkey is just a place that's really been calling to me, especially over the last year. And, it's probably Instagram's fault with everybody posting from like Cappadocia with all the hot air balloons flying up. And I'm just like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I want to be there. So that I think that would be one of them. But, for the most part, I feel like there's this really interesting thing. I remember there was this show. Did you ever watch the show Orange is the New Black on Netflix?
Absolutely. Yep. Binged it with my wife.
Such a great show. Yeah, it's such a great show. And the theme song is a song called You've Got Time, which is a double entendre. You've got time, and it's about being in prison and all that stuff. And it's the woman who sings it is named Regina Spektor. Amazing singer, amazing artist. And there's a line in the song that I remember when I first was listening to the theme song when I would watch the show, I really truly thought, because I'm so arrogant, I truly thought that she messed up a line in her own song. Every time I would hear this line, I'm like, God, how did nobody catch this and tell her that she's saying something backwards? And the line was, taking steps is easy, standing still is hard. And I remember back in the day watching that, I'd be like, no, you got it. It's super easy to just stand still. It's hard to take steps. But the more it sat with me and the more I looked at it, and when you look at it from like a soul perspective, it is much harder to stand still when you know there is something calling you that you want to do that's greater. Taking those steps is way, way easier than the atrophy that your soul experiences by standing still for too long. Right. And so that always plays in my head. And it doesn't mean I don't get afraid. And I'm launching a new thing right now, and it's an entirely different space I've never been in before. And there's all these unknowns. And what I know is that from my life and from everybody's life is that success leaves clues. And this is not the first thing that I've ever done that I didn't know how to do. There's plenty of things. Everything that we know how to do now, there was a time we didn't know how to do it. There's nobody that came out of the womb and was ready for a corporate career or ready for marriage or ready for anything else, right? You have to learn these things. You have to cultivate. You have to navigate. And so for me, it's just this understanding of noticing what it has been about my past successes and knowing that the success leaves clues and that anything that I did before is portable and transferable into what I'm doing now. So it doesn't take away the fear, but it does tell me that if anxiety for me, which is my core belief here, if anxiety comes from the belief that there is some future where I won't be okay, right? That's to me the entire root of anxiety. If I knew for a fact that in the future I'd be fine, then what's going on now wouldn't matter to me at all because I know that in the future I'm going to be fine. So the only reason I experience anxiety ever, I'm just speaking for me, this is not universal capital T truth, but for me is because I have some fear that in the future I'm not going to be okay. And so anything that I do now when I feel fear of something, it's reminding myself I've always been okay, even in the times I thought I wasn't okay, because if I wasn't truly okay, then I wouldn't be here to have the conversation I'm having with you now. There's been nothing I've ever been through that I haven't gotten through because the evidence is showing that because I'm here talking to you right now. So remembering that is helpful for me when I'm fearful about taking steps.
I love that. Success leaves clues. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day who wanted to know, like, how did you pivot from a tech director to a life coach? And I said, well, after I did all of the work and I looked through it all, my very first gig was doing admissions work and, high school admissions and college admissions. What was I doing? Like at my core, helping people find a better way to move forward. Then I got into tech. What was I doing? Helping people find a better way to move forward, whether that was organizing files or learning a tool or whatever, helping people move forward. And what does a life coach do? Helping people move forward. I think success leaves clues is spot on. So what does failure do for us then? Does it the same?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people will say you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes, right? So I think that's always a good thing to look at. Failure. When I can look at failure objectively, then failure is information, right? So in the same way that if I walk outside today, I don't check the weather, it starts pouring down rain and I don't have an umbrella. The fact of the matter is that I got wet. And the fact of the matter is that I now have information to say, hey, if I don't like the experience of getting wet, what are things that I can do to try to mitigate that risk? Oh, well, I could check the weather report in the morning, or I could just start carrying around an umbrella everywhere I go, or I could get really weird and be like, I'm only going outside if I know that I'm near a place that I can go inside if it rains. Like once I start seeing this as just information, as historical data points, not emotional data points, but historical data points, then the failure, it doesn't have to be as heavy on me if things don't work out the way I want them to.
It's interesting that you said the forecast and the weather as your example from failure and then learning. I say to myself all the time, I see people, it's raining and they don't have a rain jacket or they don't have an umbrella. I'm like, why? Somebody tells you every day what the weather's going to be. How is that possible? But when you do, when you do learn from your mistakes, when you do learn from your failures, right, you take all of that into, I guess, your value bank of life, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of people, I think, get stuck there. They don't learn from it. And so what's one thing, like when you are talking to people, what's one thing that you do to help them learn from their fear or learn from their failures?
Well, and this goes back to the whole being before doing thing, right? So there's a very popular thing in personal growth, and there's nothing wrong with it. It can be really helpful, is reframing things, right? Like, this didn't happen to you, it happened for you, and things along that line, those lines, which can be great, like to really just kind of shift the narrative and shift the story that we have. The challenge becomes is that there are kind of three layers to how we experience the world around us. Number one, level one, you could say, is kind of being a prisoner of circumstance, the entire kind of topic of my book, right? Like, if something good happens, then you feel good. If something bad happens, then you feel bad. And that's kind of how we all experience life for the most part, unless you have really incredible role models as a child that teach you differently. I did not. Most people I've spoken to did not. And nothing wrong with them. They didn't know any better. They learned from their parents. And so, of course, the lineage of this misunderstanding is pervasive. And so that's kind of layer one. Layer two, or level two, is where you start looking at the content of your thinking, which is exactly this, the reframing and kind of saying like, well, what could this possibly mean that's more empowering and all those kinds of things. Really, really helpful. And actually, I'd say the vast majority of Prison Break, which I wrote in 2015, 2016, was, it's a lot of working at layer two or level two. Level three is where we really take it to an entirely different perspective. And that's shifting from looking at the content of your thought to the context of the fact that you are thinking and taking your thoughts seriously. In other words, it doesn't matter what you are thinking. It matters that you are thinking and that you are taking that thinking seriously. And so instead of me sitting down with somebody and trying to reframe their failures, what instead I want to look at is what is their relationship to their thinking in general, whatever the thought is, regardless of what the thought is. And if they have a very serious relationship with their thinking, that's where I want to start. And I want to help them have a more casual relationship with their thinking. This is a core part of the work that I do, is helping people to have a more casual relationship with the thoughts that are in their head.
So when you say a casual relationship with the thoughts,
yeah. So when I was, 6 or 7 years old, I was raised by this, single Jewish mother, so she can hear everything we're saying right now. And so she and I, it was only the two of us, only child, single mother. And when we would go shopping and go to stores, I was a pretty good kid. Like, I would just stay by her. She didn't have to put one of those weird baby leashes on me or anything. Like, I would just stick next to her. But at one point we were actually in Altamont Springs. I don't know if you remember back in the day, they had it was Gaffer's, then it became a Dillard's, but it was a department store. And we go in there. I'm like, again, 6 or 7 years old. We're walking through the department store, walking in the women's section. My mom was looking at something. And I guess I kind of veered off and kind of went on my own little path, and she didn't notice because she's used to me just kind of being next to her. And so I just, little boy, walking through the women's department, and I happened to see a female mannequin with a dress on. Now, I'm a curious little boy. I'm not sure what the world's all about yet. So I just walk right up to the mannequin and lift up the skirt and just look up the dress of the mannequin. Now, my mom happens to notice at some point that I'm not near her and starts darting around trying to figure out where I'm at, and sees me in the act looking up the mannequin skirt. And she darts it like Usain Bolt across the department store, grabs me by the hand as quickly as possible, ushers me away as quickly as she can. She is so embarrassed, right? She has a very serious relationship with what I just did because she believes it's some kind of indictment against her parenting. right? I'm going to look like such a bad mom. People are going to think my child's a deviant, all these different things, right? She had a very serious relationship. Now contrast that with the other people who were in the department store, of whom I have no recollection. Of course, I was 6 or 7 years old. But if you think about the other people in the department store that saw this happen, what do you think their reaction probably was? Something like, oh my gosh, what a cute little kid, or he's so curious, or oh my God, look at that mom. It's got to be so difficult raising a little boy by yourself, and they would have compassion for her. So it's interesting. Mom is embarrassed and mortified. These other people feel love, joy, compassion, curiosity. What's the difference? Well, they have a very casual relationship with what I did. They don't feel like it means anything about who they are or what they've done or what they should be doing. So that same thing can happen with our thinking. When I take my thinking seriously, that I need to usher it away and I need to make sure nobody sees it, and I'm afraid if somebody sees it that it means something bad about me. But if I have a casual relationship with the thinking, it's like, oh, there's one of those thoughts again. There's one of those things I'm taking seriously. Does that serve me to take that thought seriously? Can I really notice in this moment that everything around me is perfectly fine, if not for the attachment that I have to these thoughts that happen to be residing in my head, that are not even necessarily my thoughts? So that shift into a more casual relationship with thinking in that way, that's what I'm pointing to.
Got it. And so for me, what I hear, right, in my language is that serious thoughts tend to be negative thoughts, right? And casual thoughts could very well tend to be positive thoughts. And so when we have a circumstance in our lives, we have two choices, right? We can have positive thoughts about them, or we can have negative thoughts about them. And when we do, they generate feelings. In this instance, right, your mom had a feeling of being embarrassed or maybe even ashamed, right, that you were doing that, where other people might have been like, oh, it was funny, and then they just went on with their days. That's helpful for me to kind of say, oh, for my folks, that's the term that I use. And so I love the casual relationship with your thoughts. Like, that's brilliant. It just takes
and that's exactly it, right? It's how do we make the experience of life feel less heavy, like it has less pressure? You nailed it. I mean, this is it. I always say you have to lighten up to level up, right? And it's so, I really believe that like bringing lightness, bringing some form of levity to life, is just such an important thing to do. And it takes away so much of the need to fix life or change life or reframe life. Just to be lighter around life makes such a big difference.
I like that. I agree too. Like, for me, humor just fits in. It just feels good, right? And people gravitate to it, something that resonates with them, because I don't take myself too seriously. I hope others don't take me too seriously either, right? Other than what I'm providing to them is like of value. It's my own journey, but it's an important point. Like, yes, if we step back, right? If we step back and do it from like a 30,000 point or foot view to say, all right, look down on this scenario. You have two different choices. Which one are you going to make? Which one's going to make you feel better? And so I think that's a great point.
Yeah, it's huge.
Great point. I'm curious. Is there something in your life that you would do if no one would judge you for it? You seem like pretty much like an open book to me, but I'm just curious.
I'm pretty open. I love performing. So I don't think there's a whole lot there. Yeah, maybe like one day, like, I don't know, open a coffee shop or something, and people would be like, what the hell is he doing with a coffee shop? What does he know about coffee? But even that, I would just be like, the answer is nothing. I know nothing about coffee shops. But I'm here to learn. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm pretty open when it comes to that stuff.
You mentioned coffee, and on your hat, I think it says coffee, hip hop.
Yeah, coffee, hip hop, and mental health. Yep.
Yeah, is that what that said?
This is just a brand. A brand that I actually, somebody turned me onto it, and they're just three of my favorite things: coffee, hip hop, and mental health. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to wear the hat.
Okay. I was like, maybe that was your new thing you were like venturing in. You mentioned coffee. I was like, maybe this is a promo for
I am doing a brand. I am doing a clothing brand actually that is in the realm of mental health. So it's a mental, I'm trying to change the narrative here from strictly mental health to mental wealth, right? That there's so much more than just like getting to a baseline. There's so much more that can be done with your mental health. And so it's what I'm creating now is a mental wealth, focused movement that is disguised as a clothing brand. Right. So the easy low hanging fruit will be really fun, stylish, inspiring clothing. But on the back end of that is all this education and all the things that we talk about here, and having that mental health conversation or mental wealth conversation be much more front of mind for people and have it much more accessible to people that maybe wouldn't normally seek out that kind of information.
Mental wealth. Like, that's spot on. Really spot on. I was listening to somebody recently. They were talking about, working with a client. And they were asking them, where are they on a scale of 1 to 10? Pick a subject. relationships, career, finance, whatever it may be. And they said, all right, well, you say a 7. What is it going to take you to get to a 10? And the person really struggled with that because I thought going from 7 to 10 was perfection. When we talk about mental health, if you pivot and talk about mental wealth, no, you can go from 1 to 10 today. And then it's a point. Like there's a whole nother line of numbers to get to 1,000 or infinity. So our journeys are always in this moment. What is it going to take us to get to a 10? So the mental wealth part, I think, resonates for me in that regard. So what led you to say mental wealth instead of mental health?
Yeah, I mean, there's just such a focus from people on like financial wealth, right? They want to build their financial wealth, and what's the impetus to build financial wealth? There's maybe safety. There's maybe for some people they want to be able to give back at a bigger level. For some people maybe there's some greed involved, which is fine too. Like no judgment. There's all kinds of different reasons that people focus on their financial wealth. But, and that's something that people really focus on, and they want things to appreciate, and they invest in it, and they do all these things. But with mental health, it almost seems like it's always or very frequently looked at as a rehabilitative thing. And so we're not talking about, it would be like if we're having a wealth conversation about bouncing back from bankruptcy is different than having a wealth conversation about investing in real estate or investing in the stock market or opening a business or whatever. They're two different conversations entirely. So I love that we need to have the conversation as well about mental health in general. But this is really about taking this to the next level. And it's not even about needing to get to some super high level where you're like, you keep up leveling. Cause I think that can be a really egoic kind of path as well. And if we're doing that, we're always kind of seeking what's next and resisting what's now. And that's kind of the definition of suffering, right? If you're always seeking what's next and resisting what's now, you're never going to be happy. So I want people to figure out whatever their definition of mental wealth is, where they feel a connection to life. They feel a connection to being alive that is independent of any of the people or things that they have. Like just their own being in this world is enough. Their own reverence for life is enough to make them happy.
I appreciate that so much because we do get so focused. Like as human beings, we spend a lot of time looking at what was and what will come. But very rarely do we live in like what is now and what's good now. And I think the more that people can get to a point to say, if I can find one thing that made me happy today, I could have had a crap day from like top to bottom, but somewhere in there could have been just the slightest, tiniest thing that gave you joy. And so one of the things I like to tell people is like, take that, put it on a Post-it note, put it in a mason jar and do that every single day. And then on your birthday, open it up. And that's the greatest gift you can ever give yourself is all these snippets of things. And I think that for me is what equates to mental wealth. You're basically putting a penny in the bank every single day for an entire year. And when you're done, you're much better off than you were before because you can look back and say, oh my gosh, look at what my life has been. Like I have found joy.
It's huge, man. It's huge being able to document those little things. It's, it's one of the reasons I changed up the way I was doing my gratitude practice even. My gratitude practice for a while just felt like a checkbox thing. It was just like, you're supposed to do it. You're supposed to meditate. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. And I hear this all the time from clients, especially around meditation, that they can't do it. It's just, they can't do it. They can't sit still. Their mind's racing and all these other things. And I have an entirely different view on meditation. We can talk about it if it'd be valuable. But it's just really this understanding that my gratitude practice wasn't actually evoking the emotions that it was supposed to evoke. And then I came across this quote, and I don't even know who it was from. I don't even know if it's actually attributed to anybody, but it was a quote I found that said, imagine you could only take with you tomorrow what you are grateful for today. Right? Imagine you could only take with you tomorrow what you're grateful for today. And when I had that perspective, I was like, oh my God. Like I started looking at everything. I started looking at like the dexterity I have in my fingers. Like, well, I don't want that to go away when I wake up tomorrow morning. And like my legs happen to work and I can go from point A to point B by walking or jogging or running or whatever. I was like, I don't want that to go away. Like my life would be so much different if I didn't have access to working legs. And you start just looking at all the different things, even the ability for my mouth to create words to come out. It's just like all these things. And you start going like, oh my God, there's so many things that I just take for granted every single day. So that had to be a shift for me because the whole like, oh, I'm grateful for my house, I'm grateful for my car, like it didn't resonate. So whatever works for you to get into this place of feeling joy, of seeing perspective, of being in the now, that's such a valuable path to go down.
I love that. And I do want to get into the meditation piece because I talk about it here on the show from time to time, my own journey with it. So I'm interested. What is your take on it? And how do you go about it?
I love meditation now that I have reworked what I think it's for. I, again, was also in the camp before, just like with the gratitude stuff, that it was just like a checkbox, right? And one of the things I realized that was a challenge for me, and I've done every kind of meditation. I was trained in transcendental meditation, and I've done just every kind you could think of, guided and quiet, silent, and all the different kinds. And they all had varying levels of effectiveness for me. But what shifted for me was that, and this is what I hear from my clients all the time, especially people that are very type A and ambitious and work really hard. And they just say, I can't get my mind to quiet down. I sit there to meditate and my mind just keeps racing. And the interesting thing is that if the goal of meditation is to completely quiet the mind, then in a way we're demonizing the mind for doing what it does. The mind is supposed to run. If our minds ever actually stop running, it means we're comatose or it means we're dead. And so I don't need my mind to quiet down as a part of my meditation for it to be successful. So the way I started explaining this was, and hopefully you'll appreciate this being in schools, although I don't know how young of a school age were you ever in, like, as from a work capacity?
Pre-K-12. Okay,
cool. So you would get this. Okay, so think about this. There's a difference between nap time and recess when it comes to schools, right? Nap time, the kids take naps. Recess, they go outside and play. Now, what I think most people think is that meditation is supposed to be nap time. Right? Everything quiets down, everything gets silent. But if you were to look at what a teacher has to do for nap time in a classroom, right? They have to make sure the lights are at the right level, the temperatures are the right level, that all the like sleeping bags or whatever are laid out properly. And you don't want Timmy next to Johnny because he has a tendency to like pinch him while he's sleeping. And then when you wake him up, you have to wake him up really slowly because you don't want him to be irritated. You got to have the snack ready to go. Like there's so much that the teacher has to manage in order for nap time to be successful. But you look at recess on the flip side, teacher takes the kids out, there's a boundary around the playground. Teacher can sit there and pretty much read his or her book and let the kids do what they do until they're done running around, they get tired, and they come back inside. And there's nothing else the teacher has to do. And so for me, that became my shift in meditation is I'm going to have recess time meditation. I'm going to sit here, and if my thoughts decide they want to run around like crazy banshees out in the playground, then I just sit back and watch them, and I don't tell them they can't. The teacher would never take kids out to recess and then say, now all of you be quiet and sit down. Kids would be like, what are you talking about? There's a playground. Why would I not play with all this stuff? So that was a big shift for me, is not trying to get it to be about quieting my mind. My mind's still quiet sometimes, but I'm not saying that that's the only way my meditation is successful. If my mind needs to run and do what it needs to do, I don't want to engage with it. I want to let it do its thing. I don't want to go in and say, oh, you're saying I suck, or you're saying all these things are not working out. Let's talk about that. No, we're not talking about things in meditation. Just like the teacher doesn't go and talk to the kids during recess. We just want to witness it. We just want to be aware of it and let it do what it needs to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that's where I come at it from meditation as well. Like I'm a big fan of the Calm app and Tamara Leverett and her work. And that's what she talks about, is that you're never going to stop your mind. But what we try to do in meditation is say, okay, thought, I see you, but just give me a second. Like go over here for a second and I'll be back to you. I'm just going to like refocus on my breathing. It's okay to have it be there. And what it teaches us is that we don't get lost in our thoughts. Right. We acknowledge that they exist. We acknowledge that there's something going on that we need to deal with, but when we're ready to do it. So I appreciate that you bring that point of view as well, because that's what it is. And I love the idea of recess as opposed to nap time. That was brilliant. Yeah. That was good stuff.
Awesome. Glad it resonated. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you put it in the context of education, so I did that for a long time. So I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Like
you're like, yeah, I know this world. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No offense to upper school teachers or middle school teachers, but I think lower school teachers have the hardest time, like
100%.
Being able to corral kids. Middle school people are unique in their own way because they have to deal with middle school children. Nobody wants to go back to that point in life, and people live it every day teaching those kids. But yeah, that's tough. No, but I love the analogy between recess and nap time. Yeah, it resonates, and hopefully it does for somebody on the show too who's looking to get into the meditation, who's trying it and being like, well, my mind doesn't stop running. Well, no, it's not supposed to.
Yep.
It's not supposed to.
That's right.
That's great. So you talked a little bit about your brand, right? This new thing that you're launching.
Yep.
When can people expect that to be out?
So we're working diligently now. So it's called Hope Dealer. And so it's this whole brand about, bringing more hope into the world. You can't choose what you're dealt, but you can choose what you deal. And so while there's a lot of people dealing in fear and hate and scarcity and war and all these other things, we can be people who deal in hope and in joy and in really, impacting people's lives in a positive way. So right now we are in the, design and manufacturing phase, it takes longer than I thought it was going to take. But we're working on that stuff. I actually have I had a meeting with graphic designer this morning, meeting with my merch team this afternoon. And so hopefully within the next 2 to 3 months, we'll start having some of the initial pieces come out is what I'm hoping for. Hope Dealer.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, no, I love that. Hope Dealer. I'm looking forward to that. I know my listeners are probably looking forward to it as well. And Jason Goldberg, author of Prison Break, Vanquish the Victim, Own Your Obstacles, Lead Your Life. Also a comedian, a rapper. We didn't even get into that in today's show. But you must be excited for the Super Bowl halftime show like the rest of Gen X.
Right.
And but I really appreciate you being here and having a conversation on Positivity on Fire. And it was a great conversation. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. And I'm so happy you're doing this work in the world. Please keep it up. We need it.
I definitely will.
There's so much more that can be done with your mental health. And so it's what I'm creating now is a mental wealth focused movement that is disguised as a clothing brand.
Hey, Positivity Posse. If you're ready to coach yourself, I invite you to download my free workbook, 7 Steps to Regain, Redefine, and Reimagine Your Life. Head over to www.jasonramsden.com/my-links and click on the download link at the top of the page. It's that simple. And hey, if you're interested in working with me as your own personal life coach, visit jasonramsden.com and click Get Started in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. I hope to talk to you soon. Until then, have an amazing day. Positivity on Fire is a production of Impact One Media LLC. All rights reserved.